this is basically it's just a fermenter box that we've cut a little bit of the top off, and this brown stuff is peat, and peat helps to keep out all the, let's say, negative, bad energy, the radiation and things like that, because the preparations are very sensitive to that kind of damaging, let's say, wave or whatever, or energy. And this is 500 that's in this pot right here. I don't know if you can see that, and it's just, you know, the cow manure that was buried in the ground. We're actually starting to do a little bit of this horn bearing ourselves, but currently we're buying this from a biodynamic person, a person who does the preparations. This is just an herb, chamomile herb, which we make a tea out of. This is something called barrel compound. It's a homeopathic compost that we spray usually during the winter months on the soil. And that, of course, is again stored in a pot buried underneath the peat. This is the Horsetail Herb, which is the other foliar spray, the 508, which is just basically horsetail. You know, we'd call it weed or whatever, that you ferment and you make a homeopathic spray out of. And then in these smaller jars are the compost preparations. This is the 502 yarrow flower, 503, 4, 5, 6, and the valerian is in the small dropper jars because it's a liquid. It's pressed flowers. So we keep all this stuff stashed in this box to protect it and bring it out when we use it. The 501 is actually kept outside in the sun. You know, I was first turned on to biodynamics from a friend of mine, a college friend of mine, who wasn't a grape grower, but he practiced it just in his home garden. And then I kept running into this guy who's now my consultant. His name's Philippe Armenier, and we just really hit it off, and you know, felt like we had a really strong bond and tie. And I've been thinking about biodynamics probably for about 5 or 6 years prior to me starting, and then I just one day just decided to do it. Philippe came by the winery, and I just said, sure, why not? Let's give it a shot. The water doesn't need to be hot. No. Actually, cold, fresh, rainwater, whatever is probably the freshest water that you possibly can get is the best thing to use. So if we don't have rainwater, we'll take some of our well water and we'll fit it into a tank or buckets or whatever and leave it outside, just to kind of bring some more life and light and air and stuff into the water. I don't know if it's more challenging. It makes you more conscious, let's say, of what's kind of going on around you, and aware that perhaps there are some greater forces that are at work on us as individuals and the earth and plants and everything. But I don't think it's a challenge in that way. It really, the time that I spend thinking about things is a positive. Stirring machine, which is a really important part when you do your sprays with the biodynamic preparations that you use for sprays. And there's 3 of them that you use on the vineyard, either on the soil or on the canopy. One is the horn manure preparation. Another one which is the one you use for the soil. The other one is a silica, a horn silica, which is basically just crushed quartz that's mixed with some rainwater and then again aged in a cow horn beneath the soil, much like the 500 is aged in a cow horn buried in the earth. The cow horn is buried during the winter months, and the silica is buried during the summer. So both of those preparations, as well as another preparation, which is equisetum, it's a horsetail, which we actually make a fermented tea out of. That's used for like a mildewcide or a fungicide. It has properties that let's say, divert the bacteria back down into the soil where it belongs rather than up into the vines. And when you use those preparations, they're all added in small homeopathic doses. So they need to be mixed with water. And the process, the dynamization process, is very specific in Steiner's work in that they must be stirred for an hour, and they must be stirred in one direction for about 30 seconds until you get a vortex. And then you need to reverse your stirring and create a chaos period, and then stir the other direction and then get another vortex. This all helps the, let's say, energy that's in the either the manure preparation or the silica preparation mixed with the water. So we try to use rainwater. We try to use the freshest water that we possibly can. We'll put the water into these tanks, and then it's just hydraulically driven. So we'll just hook it up to the tractor hydraulics. This lever right here goes one direction, goes the other direction. So there's a person that just needs to stand here for the hour while the process is going on, and then it stirs it, and we'll get a vortex to where the water is almost all the way down to the bottom of the tank, and probably up to about the top right about here. And we do about, I think, about 90 gallons or 100 gallons of water per time. And then the paddles create the vortex, and when you stop them and go the other direction, you create that chaos period, and then it'll build another vortex going in the other direction. So for the first, when we started doing it, we started with 16 acres, now we do 125. We used to hand stir it all, and really it's probably ultimately the best way to do it is to stir it by hand, but it's incredibly labor intensive because I would have to have, probably about 8 guys stir, because it's very physical work to stir, and then of course you need, the quality of the stirring is very important, so you need to create that good vortex, you need to create chaos, so it gets pretty tiring, so you have to kind of rotate guys in and out on the different buckets that we have. We do probably 500 sprays a year, and probably 3 to 5, let's say, of the 501, the silica sprays, as well as some other homeopathic teas that we make, and something else called barrel compound, which is a homeopathic compost, which they don't need quite the hour stirring, but they do require some stirring time. So all told, it's a lot of labor, and it's really intensive. So, and then the quality, of course, is really important. So in order to have a good, mindless machine do it, we know that we're going to get good quality stirring, although ultimately probably the best way to do it is by hand. But again, it's tough to do when you're doing 125 acres. These sprayers, the sprayers are just standard fan sprayers, and then we just control the nozzles here, the direction that they point, and how many are open. So of course these ones are open down here and pointed towards the ground when we're doing the 500, the cow manure, and then we use the upper ones here when we're doing the 501, the silica spray, because you want to create kind of a mist on the top of the vines. So these are just standard sprayers, and for us to do the whole vineyard within the time frames in the calendar, which is another subject we haven't talked about quite yet, but we can do about half the vineyard in an afternoon or a morning, so we can get our spraying done in 2 days. This is a biodynamic planting and sowing calendar. It's kind of the calendar that we follow, because when you do your work on your vineyard or your applications of sprays and preparations, you need to be very conscious of what's happening to the earth in relation to the moon, in relation to planets, in relation to different constellations and where the moon is at. And basically there's 5 different kinds of days, really 4, that focus on different aspects of what's going on in, let's say, a plant. So they're described as either a flower day, a leaf day, a fruit day, or a root day. And they relate to an element, I guess. Like a leaf day would be related to water, a flower day would be related to light, a fruit day would be warmth, and a root day would be earth. So we like to do things on fruit days for sure, because that's kind of everything that we're about is fruit. And certainly root days are acceptable and flower days are acceptable as well, because there's no way that we could do all the work on those specific fruit days, because there's maybe 2 a week, maybe 2 every 8 or 9 days. So it's tough to get all your work done, but we do try to focus on fruit days, certainly, to do our spray applications. And like I said, to use the sprayers and to be able to cover the vineyard in this time according to the calendar in 2 days is pretty good. And then this is kind of cool thing that we have going on too that you can look at. This is where we make the homeopathic compost, the barrel compound it's called. And basically it's a recipe of screened cow manure. It's screened for consistency. And then we take some crushed basalt and some eggshells. And we actually do a stirring process with solids. So you just kind of use shovels and you turn and mix this stuff for an hour. And then you'll come in and you'll put the manure into one of these pits right here, and these are pits that we just dug and we lined with brick. This is, you can do it in wood barrels, you can do it in, a bunch of different things. We just chose brick. You lay half of the amount of your manure in there, and then you'll put the compost preparations in there, and then you'll lay another half on top of that, and then you'll put your compost preps. And then it ferments, does its composting process, and probably 2 to 3 months, something like that, for when it's good for us to use and spray on the vineyard. During that process, it's just turned over. It's kind of mixed in the hole here one time. And of course, we try to do that according to what's going on with the moon and the planets and all that stuff. So. And everything is done in homeopathic doses, which is pretty interesting. So let's say we use like 50 grams an acre of that barrel compound, sprayed in probably 3 different sprays, so a total of 150 grams of that material. And you see, a real dramatic difference in the soil. We're really trying to build a healthy, biologically active, humic type of soil. Ultimately, if your soil is in, perfect balance, then you'll have a balance naturally. The plant will kind of naturally become immune and resistant to diseases or pests. I'm sure that takes, a lot of years of doing, biodynamic to do it. I can say this, though. We did a trial of an acre of Syrah last year where we did no applications of anything, because we're still doing some organic applications for mildewcide, fungicides for mildew and other things. We took an acre up there in the Syrah and didn't spray with anything but the preparations. We did a little bit more of the 508, a little bit more nettle tea to kind of control the fungus a little bit, and had a totally clean vineyard all year. And last year was, I think, for me, the highest mildew pressure year that I can remember. So it was pretty amazing. Yeah, the preparations are really inexpensive. They do not, cost a tremendous amount. It's a bit more labor intensive, so certainly, labor is more, and you really probably should, have the right equipment to do it. So, if you need to purchase, we had to purchase an additional spray rig, we had to purchase, an additional tractor. So, but ultimately we probably could have used both anyway, with a traditional program. So, I think that initially, because of the labor costs being a little bit more intensive, that it does cost more, but ultimately it should cost you less. When you create soils that are healthy and humic, they have a tendency to keep a really good level of moisture in the soil for a longer period of time than, let's say, a compacted type of soil. and so ultimately your plants should use less water, which is another big savings because we pump out of wells. It's all energy, electricity driven. So I think in the long run it could possibly cost less, but initially it costs a little bit more. There was a 500 spray that was done on this soil yesterday, and they did a pass. We usually go back with a chisel actually and pass through after we do a spray. Now you can see it's just very soft, nicely textured, with some wonderful kind of silkiness to it. It's really dramatically changed from a heavy clay into this beautifully textured soil. And you can see that the process of being very active with chisel and going through the through here, let's say fairly frequently with that, helps to bring a lot of air. And you want air and you want some light to go into your soil. With these soils before, when we were doing cover crops, which we don't do a lot of cover crops anymore, we'd leave the cover, so we'd have basically in the middle of the summer it's just dead grass, but very compacted dirt soil, and we used to get this major cracking because this is heavy clay, so it's very expandable soil, and the cracks would be an inch to 3 inches wide, and they could go down maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4 feet down into the ground. And so you get a lot of drying that way. You get a lot of air going in there. You get a lot of dry air drying out the subsoil. And with farming like this, we keep wonderful kind of moisture balance. And this is after some pretty heavy rains in the last couple of weeks. The soil is not overly wet at all. It really has a really perfect kind of level of moisture right now. And we don't have any erosion issues because the soil is in this great state. It really just takes all this water, and being a kind of a heavier clay soil, it doesn't necessarily have the capacity to drain very well on the top, but it drains extremely well now and delivers that moisture down into the subsoil, which is kind of what you want. And I think ultimately will help to get us away from having to water so much as well, which in this area is pretty important. We're a pretty dry area. We only average about 14 inches of rain a year. So it's pretty soft, and stuff like this probably about 18 inches down in the ground. And you can always also smell it. Of course you can't smell it on camera, but you can get a nice kind of humic, kind of smell out of it. Growing kind of earthy, humic soil that has been here. This is the only thing that we've added to it is compost, and we do make compost every year, and it's basically animal manure compost, cow mostly, and the Biodynamic preparations that we spray on here as well, and that's it. And then the process, the working of the soil, I think is really, really important in order to get it texturally like it is now. And we can walk just across here, and this soil that we're looking at here has been in the Biodynamic the longest. And then right across the way, we just ran a trial initially, and you can see it's 30 feet, 40 feet apart, but this ground it hasn't been in Biodynamic as much, and you can just see right away that it's a lot clumpier. It's a lot stickier. It doesn't break. It doesn't have the texture that soil has down there, and it's stickier clay. So this is what that soil used to look like right across the way, and we're in the process of changing this soil to look like what we got up there. Yeah, probably 4 to 5 years. I mean, we've been seeing that over the last couple of years, the real improvement in the texture, and it's not like we're after growing, big plants and huge crops, because really we want to keep our same yields that we're getting, which are, moderate levels of yields. And I think we're just growing, more balanced plants and, better quality fruit than we probably did initially. And we can see it in the winery. Our fermentations, are much cleaner. They're much better than we've ever had before. There's no problems with stuck fermentations. The nutrient level of the grapes and the must is much higher than it used to be. So it's pretty amazing. And then, I think it translates into a little bit more depth and complexity and kind of the things that I like, a combination of some nice ripeness and power with elegance. And I think that's really been the case for the last few vintages of us while we've been doing this, and more so than it was in the past. Chemicals for, weeds. Of course, we have a few more weeds than a lot of our neighbors do. But we have mechanical ways that we, deal with weed control. It's early in the season, we haven't gotten around to it. So really you farm like you're growing great wine grapes, and I don't think that changes at all. It's just, a slightly different treatment, focus, a different kind of philosophy, let's say, about how to get there. And, there's a lot of right ways to grow wine grapes and get great quality wine grapes. And, I think what's really important is finding, whether it's biodynamic or organic or, sustainable or, conventional, whatever people are comfortable with. And I think there's success on all, in all of those kinds of farming. I think as long as people are conscientious farmers and take care of their grapes. Well, I think that you can, it gives you an understanding, let's say, ahead of time of the potential conditions during the season. Like last year, there was a lot of influence of the watering planets. It was a very water-driven year. We had, 3 feet of rain here, 2 feet more than normal, and so if you think about it and you have some of that information ahead of time, you can, do some things within the biodynamic realm that can, help you to, get through potential problems that you might have. Like this year, there's a lot of influence from light planets, so we're not thinking that light is going to be a real problem, but there is not a lot of influence from warmth planets, so there could be a cooler. And then we can see we're here in April 20th, just about April 19th, and we have very little growth on the vines when in the past few years we probably had a foot or more of growth on the vines. So is it reassuring? I don't know, but it seems like a lot of it comes true, and you can, have a good idea about what maybe the potential, season is going to look like, and how to go about, farming and timing things, and then of course if there's any additional sprays or anything that you can do, or focus on, certain aspects that would help you out in a watery year or too much light year or whatever it is. Then I think that is all, going to benefit, the quality of the grapes in the long run.